She's trespassing on private property, my daughter-in-law said into her phone. I stood frozen under the pink and white balloon arch, one hand still holding the diaper cake I had spent 3 days building. Yes, officer. Right now. I don't know how she got in. If you've ever seen a woman publicly erased from her own family in front of guests, children, and a table full of pink cupcakes, stay until the end. And please comment below with your city if you've ever witnessed something like this happen. I want to know where in the world mothers-in-law are being treated like ghosts in their own bloodline. And if you believe justice belongs to those who are quietly cast aside, hit that subscribe button. I didn't think I'd ever speak up. But someone needs to. Let me back up. 3 weeks earlier, my son called to say they were hosting a baby shower. Their first child, my first grandchild, was due in 6 weeks, and they wanted to celebrate. The only issue I wasn't formally invited. I mean, you're always welcome, Mum. My son mumbled over the phone, avoiding direct language the way a child tiptoes around broken glass. But Mia's handling everything. So just let her lead, okay? I should have known then. But I showed up that day in a soft peach cardigan, my late husband's pearl pin at my collar. I carried a tray of deviled eggs and the 3-tier diaper cake I'd made from scratch. It had real satin ribbons. The top layer had a tiny crown for the baby, just like the one I placed on my son's head when he turned 1. I didn't even make it to the gift table. The moment Mia saw me, her expression shifted like glass under heat. "Oh," she said. Just that. "Oh." Then she smiled. To the guests. "Excuse me a moment," she added brightly. She took 3 steps away and whipped out her phone. I didn't hear the full conversation, just the sharpness in her tone, and how she glanced at me like I was the overgrown bush ruining her party decor. Guests started whispering. Someone's child pointed at me and asked, "Who's that lady?" When the police arrived, 2 officers, I was still standing there, stuck between the balloon arch and a tray of cold pasta salad. Mia walked over and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I never gave her permission to be here. We've had repeated issues. She's been asked to stay away." "Is that true, ma'am?" one officer asked me kindly. I couldn't find words. My throat had turned to stone. I had raised the man who gave this woman a baby. I had paid their rent the first year of their marriage. I had hand-sewn the very onesie that was hanging above the cake table. And yet in that moment, I was being spoken about as if I were a squatter, a stranger, a threat. My son didn't come outside, not once. I left without a word. I didn't want to escalate the situation. I still believed it could be a misunderstanding, that maybe Mia had felt overwhelmed, that maybe this was a result of pregnancy hormones or social anxiety. But later that night, I saw the photos she posted. She had taken down every trace of my presence. The balloon arch cropped. The gift table turned away from where I'd left the diaper cake. Even the group photo where I had stood in the back, edited to blur me out. Not a single trace. The next morning, I received a voicemail from my son. His voice sounded hollow. "Mom, I'm sorry about yesterday. Mia just thought it would be less stressful if you weren't there. You have a strong presence sometimes." You know, I didn't respond. I couldn't. I walked into my kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and watched the condensation form on the outside like a slow, silent betrayal. Over the next few days, things unraveled further. I tried calling again, no one picked up. I texted Mia to ask about the baby registry. No reply. I checked the online registry myself and saw that my gift, a personalized rocking chair I had spent a month refinishing, had been marked as removed by organizer. I started feeling like I was watching my role as a mother and future grandmother being deleted in real time. I told myself I just needed space, that it was temporary, that once the baby came, things would soften. No one can resist a grandmother's love, right? But then came the neighborhood barbecue. It was held at the local park just 5 blocks from my house. I had been part of that event for 15 years. I helped organize the raffle. I knew the names of every dog, every toddler, every neighbor. This year, Mia and my son were co-hosting. I walked up carrying my famous apple pie, the one that won the Fair Ribbon in 2012. As I approached the sign-in table, a volunteer leaned toward me and whispered awkwardly, "Hmm." Mia said this is a private invite-only thing now. I blinked. This has never been private. She said it's a safety thing. For the baby. I looked over at Mia, who was laughing with a group of other expectant mothers. She never even glanced at me. That night, I sat in my empty house and realized something terrifying. This wasn't about an argument. This wasn't about hormones. This was a campaign. Quiet, strategic, cold. She was erasing me, not with yelling, not with confrontation, but with permission slips, guest lists, social media settings, and whisper campaigns. I was being trespassed out of my own bloodline, and worst of all, no one seemed to notice. It's one thing to be shouted at, it's another to be invisible. Have you ever seen someone removed from their family not with cruelty, but with cold, quiet paperwork and exclusion? If so, I'd truly like to hear your story. Drop it in the comments. You might be speaking for someone who's afraid to say it themselves. As for me, I wasn't ready to fight. Not yet. But I had no idea. My daughter-in-law wasn't done. 3 days passed after the baby shower incident, and I tried convincing myself it was just a one-off misjudgment, a mistake made in the heat of planning hormones and stress. I told myself Mia would calm down, that my son would eventually show up at my door with an apology, or at least a sliver of explanation. Instead, I noticed something peculiar. My spare key, the one they gave me when they bought their house last year, no longer worked. I had dropped off soup when my son caught the flu, that February watered the plants when they were away, and even waited inside during furniture deliveries. That key had been a token of trust, of inclusion. Now it simply clicked against the lock, dead and unyielding. I called my son. No answer. I texted, "Hey, honey, just tried to drop off some groceries, but I think the lock has been changed. Hope everything's okay." No reply. The next morning, I baked a small batch of oatmeal cookies and walked over again. This time, I rang the doorbell. From behind the frosted glass, I saw movement. A figure paused just out of view. But no one came to the door. No one said anything. I stood there for 2 full minutes, then turned around and walked home with the cookies still warm in my hands. I told myself they were just overwhelmed. Expecting a child brings chaos, fear, pressure. Maybe Mia was nesting and didn't want outside interference. I tried to be understanding. I tried to be generous. But the pattern continued. The family group chat, the one I had set up years ago, went quiet. I noticed new events being planned without me. Photos from brunches, nursery painting days, even hospital visits for checkups, all shared between cousins, aunts, friends. But I was never tagged, never mentioned. I reached out to my sister, who had always been blunt in the way only older sisters can be. "Helen," she said, "they're freezing you out." I laughed awkwardly. "Don't be dramatic." "I'm not." "You think she accidentally called the police at the baby shower?" That was a statement. I didn't want to believe her. But then came the envelope. It arrived in the mail, addressed not by hand, but printed on a label. Inside was a birth support preferences form, not from a hospital, but a template printed from the internet. It listed categories: who would be in the delivery room, who would visit, after who would be contacted. Under not to be contacted, my name was circled in blue pen. No other names were listed. I stared at the sheet in silence for a long time. Then I folded it back into the envelope, slid it into my drawer, and sat on the edge of my bed until the sun dipped below the window ledge. It wasn't just about the baby shower anymore. It was about my place in the family, the place I thought I had built with casseroles, emergency pickups, birthday banners, college tuition checks, surprise hugs and lullabies. It was being slowly, precisely disassembled, brick by brick. One afternoon, I ran into Mia's mother at the grocery store. She smiled with that familiar, polite stiffness and leaned in just enough to whisper Mia's trying to create a calm environment. I'm sure you understand. I blinked. Calm. She just wants the baby to be born into peace, no tension. I looked down at my cart. It held chamomile tea, lavender soap, and knitting yarn. The most aggressive thing in it was a bag of cinnamon. Tension, I repeated. She patted my wrist. Mia's had a lot of stress lately. She's trying to manage everything. I didn't say it then, but I wondered if she's managing everything. Who decided that I was the source of tension? That night, I pulled out the old photo album from my son's childhood, his first soccer game, his 5th birthday party, the one where he asked for a dinosaur theme, and I made a volcano cake from scratch. The year he broke his wrist, and I slept in the hospital chair 3 nights in a row. I ran my fingers over the pages, over the worn edges. I wasn't trying to live in the past. I was trying to remember when I stopped being essential. When did my devotion become a disruption? The next week I showed up at their house again. Not unannounced, I had texted twice. No reply. I rang the doorbell. No answer. As I was turning to leave, I saw a small movement near the upstairs window. The curtain shifted. I didn't imagine it. But still, nothing. Later that night, I got a message from Mia. Just a single line. Please respect our boundaries moving forward. No hi. No thanks. No we love you. Just boundaries. It didn't say what boundaries, or for how long. Just a cold clinical word meant to divide. I didn't cry that night. I sat up in the kitchen with the porch light on, sipping lukewarm coffee and staring at the silence. It's strange, isn't it? How someone can erase you not with confrontation, but with a mission. No screaming, no slamming doors, just quiet closures, quiet unfollows, quiet exclusions. One after another, until you're a footnote in a story you helped build. Have you ever experienced that, not being pushed away violently, but gently unhooked from the life you helped create? Please share it in the comments below. I know I'm not the only one. Someone reading your story might find strength in it, or at least confirmation that they're not imagining things. I didn't know it yet, but the worst part wasn't being left out of events. It was what they were planning inside that house, without me, that would soon rewrite my entire place in the family. A week went by without a single message from my son. No phone calls, no emails, no accidental texts. I stared at my phone so often, I started imagining it buzzing when it wasn't. The silence wasn't loud. It was clinical, clean, like someone had pressed delete on me and forgot to empty the trash bin. I went to the neighborhood book club on Thursday, something I'd been part of for nearly a decade. When I arrived, there was a subtle shift in the air, a certain tilt in the way people looked at me, as if they knew something I didn't. Carla, who usually saved me a seat, barely nodded. "Oh, Helen," she said, "we thought you might not be coming anymore." I blinked. "Why would you think that?" She looked away, adjusting her scarf too many times. "Just, Mia mentioned you were feeling overwhelmed lately, that you were taking a break from things." I didn't respond. I just sat quietly flipping pages in a book I had already read. When I got home, I stared at my front door, the familiar wreath I'd made out of lavender stems now drooping at the edges. I reached for my keys and paused. Was I overwhelmed? No. I was being erased with smiles, polite assumptions, and passive rewrites of the narrative. Mia wasn't just drawing lines. She was supplying the script for how others should perceive me. And the most dangerous part, people believed her. Not because they hated me, but because it was easier to believe a young, glowing mother-to-be than a woman who suddenly seemed to appear in wrong places, say the wrong things, and as the story went, didn't know how to let go. I started keeping a journal not for nostalgia, but for sanity. One entry read, "Today, I went to the store and forgot why I was there. Not because I'm old, because I'm distracted. I'm forgetting how to feel like a person." Another entry, "I found a baby hat I knitted months ago. I don't know if I should give it to them or keep it. Would it even be welcome?" The worst part of being isolated isn't being alone, it's being uncertain whether your version of reality still holds weight. That's when the self-doubt crept in. Was I too pushy? Did I overstep? Was the baby shower incident really a misunderstanding? I made worse by showing up. I started questioning my memories, my intentions, my tone. I stopped texting first. I stopped calling. I waited for my son to reach out, thinking that maybe silence would make my presence missed. Instead, I received a group email with updates about the baby registry. I was CC'd, not BCC'd, not addressed, just CC'd, like a business associate in a corporate chain. At the bottom, Mia had written, "We appreciate everyone's support during this time. We kindly ask that all gifts be mailed. We're keeping our space calm and uncluttered." Calm and uncluttered. Apparently, I was clutter now. I tried visiting the park where I used to meet other grandmothers, but even there I felt out of place. They spoke of baby kicks, nursery colours, names, and in-laws flying in. I smiled when they smiled, but I said less and less. At home, the silence multiplied. The TV was on more often. I ate standing up. I rearranged the pantry. I labelled my spice jars. I stared at the empty crib I had bought for my guest room, wondering if it would ever hold a child. The final straw came one afternoon when I received a notice from the pediatrician's office I had referred them to. It was a generic letter explaining that they were transferring providers and my emergency contact information had been removed from their file. No explanation, just a clerical update. That night, I broke down not from sadness but from confusion. I sat at my kitchen table holding my son's first school drawing in one hand and Mia's printed boundaries note in the other, wondering how both could exist in the same lifetime. Do you know that feeling? When the people who once came to you for comfort now speak of your presence as a disruption. When your memories are rich with their laughter, but their present has no room for your name. I wonder how many people watching this have felt that not the drama of being yelled at or abandoned, but the slow, invisible slide into irrelevance. If that's you, I'd truly like to hear how you handled it. Please leave a comment, even if just a few words. Your story may make someone else feel seen and remind me I'm not losing my grip on reality. I was almost ready to give up. But then one night, I stayed up late reading through old letters my husband had written me years ago. Tucked inside one of the envelopes was something I didn't remember keeping, a tiny note written by my son when he was 10. "Mom, you're my favorite person. You're like magic. I'll never forget how you make me feel." I stared at it for what felt like hours, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel crazy. I felt erased, but not invisible. And just as I started to find my breath again, I overheard something I wasn't meant to hear. And that changed everything. It started with a voicemail from the pharmacy. "Hi, Mrs. Lambert. We just wanted to check in. Your prescription refill was transferred to another account last week. We just want to confirm that this was intentional before we close the original file." I frowned. I hadn't transferred anything. I called back immediately, and the pharmacist explained politely, cautiously, that the records now listed Mia as my primary caregiver with a new delivery address under her name. Primary caregiver. I don't need a caregiver. I'm 71, and I still jog twice a week and drive myself to the farmer's market every Saturday. I made 3 pies from scratch last Thanksgiving. Something was off. I told the pharmacist to cancel the transfer. He hesitated. "I'll flag the account for review," he said. It just looked official. Came through with medical release documents. My voice trembled. Medical release from whom? I'm not allowed to say, but you might want to speak to your provider. I hung up and sat very still. This wasn't forgetfulness or miscommunication anymore. This was design. Later that day, I went to the mailbox and found a letter from the insurance company. My dental coverage had been changed. The emergency contact was no longer my sister. It was Mia. I stared at the paper, feeling my breath begin to shorten. I wasn't just being pushed away emotionally. I was being repositioned legally, medically, and socially as someone who needed supervision. Someone incapable. That weekend, I received an unexpected visit from our old housekeeper, Rosa, who had worked with us for over a decade before retiring. She'd always been close to me, like a second pair of eyes and hands during the chaos of family life. Helen, she said, hugging me warmly. I shouldn't say anything, but I've been cleaning Mia's place once a month just to help while she's pregnant. And I saw something. My stomach knotted. What? A document. I didn't read it fully, I swear, but it had your name. And something about guardianship. I only saw it because it was open on the counter when I arrived. She quickly put it away when she saw me. Guardianship. I laughed, but it was brittle, hollow. There must be some mistake, I said. I know you, Rosa said gently. There's no mistake. I walked her to her car and tried to act calm. But the moment she drove off, I locked the front door and sat at my desk, hands trembling, typing search after search. Guardianship over elderly parent, power of attorney without consent, how to remove someone from health decision-making roles. The results were terrifying. And then it hit me, the baby shower wasn't the start. It was the first public move in a game that had begun earlier in private on paper. My son's increasing distance, the silent change of locks, the delivery room restriction, the shifting of accounts and insurance. Mia hadn't just removed me emotionally, she was laying the foundation to remove me legally as someone with no rights, no say no access. I stood up dizzy. How had I missed it? I called my sister. She picked up on the first ring. Are you okay? She asked. No, I whispered. I think I'm being declared incompetent. She was silent for a second, then said, You need a lawyer. Not tomorrow. Today. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my kitchen staring at my own handwriting in old birthday cards from my son. They were eloquent, emotional, a reminder that I had once mattered deeply, and now I was being recategorized. I couldn't explain the weight of it. Not just being excluded, but being discredited. Have you ever felt that, like someone is slowly rewriting your identity behind closed doors, using paper instead of fists? I don't mean the drama of a fight. I mean the quiet horror of watching your name quietly fade from the parts of your life that define you. If you've ever been through that, or know someone who has, please share it in the comments. I need to know how others stayed grounded when the world tried to gaslight them out of their own story. The next morning, I scheduled an appointment with a private elder law attorney. He was calm, measured, and efficient. He asked me for dates, papers, accounts. He nodded as I spoke, then said, Have you noticed any changes to your property status? I blinked. What do you mean? Has anyone had access to your deed, bank accounts, retirement benefits? No, I don't think so. I'd double-check, he said. Sometimes these things start with medical guardianship and end in asset shifts. I went home, opened my fireproof file box, and checked the deed to my home. At first glance, everything seemed normal. Then I noticed a secondary name had been added to the title. My son. I hadn't signed anything. I stared at the paper hands, trembling, mouth dry. But what chilled me most wasn't the name. It was the date. It had been filed 4 weeks before the baby shower. That was when I knew. This wasn't about tension or boundaries or parenting styles. This was about control, about ownership, about elimination, neat, quiet, legal elimination. And from that moment on, I stopped waiting for an apology. I started preparing for war. The next morning, I made copies. Every single document from my fireproof box birth certificate home, deed, medical records, banking statements. I didn't fully know what I was looking for yet, but I knew one thing I couldn't afford, to trust memory alone. I also printed the email from the pharmacy, the insurance changes, and the pediatrician's contact update. I laid everything out on my kitchen table and stared at it for hours. At first glance, nothing looked obviously criminal. No glaring fraud, no forged signatures. But that was the trick. It was all subtle, clean, administered through updates, preferences, security access levels. It was a chess game played with folders and settings, and I was the piece being moved off the board. I started keeping a binder, labeled it just in case. Then, without telling anyone, I bought a small voice recorder. That afternoon I visited their house. Not to speak, just to observe. I stayed across the street near the mailbox, pretending to check for a lost delivery. I saw Mia walk outside talking to someone on the phone. She laughed, leaned against the porch post, and said, "No, I'm not worried. He's already filed the quitclaim. She's just lingering. It's almost handled." My hand froze around the mailbox flap. Quitclaim. That's the form used to transfer property ownership fast, no fuss. I backed away. Heart racing, pressed the recorder in my pocket, and whispered the time and what I'd heard. Back home, I searched public property filings online. And there it was. A quitclaim deed, filed under my address. The transfer was marked as voluntary, but there was no electronic signature from me. Just my son's. I printed the page, added it to the binder. That night, I called a former co-worker of mine, Donna, who had worked in family law for over 30 years before retiring. I didn't explain everything, just said, if someone transfers a property behind your back, but lists it as voluntary, what's your first step? She didn't even pause. Get a forensic document analyst, and never confront them directly without protection. If they're paper clean, they're prepared. I thanked her, hung up, and sat in the dark. That was when I made my decision. I would not scream. I would not beg. I would document. I began recording everything: voicemails overheard, conversations, interactions with neighbors, even the pharmacy manager who agreed to print the change request showing Mia's name. One afternoon, I visited the notary office that had witnessed the deed change. I pretended to be inquiring about another property, but when I asked casually about the Lambert file, the young assistant glanced over her clipboard and said, "Oh, the one Mia brought in. That was a fast one. We processed it same day." So it had been Mia, not my son. I leaned in and asked as innocently as possible, was that signature in front of a notary or just a drop-off? She flipped through the file again. Looks like a drop-off, but everything matched the ID on file. I smiled. Thank you. Then I walked straight to a print shop and made 4 copies of that confirmation. One went into the binder, the second to my lawyer, the third into a safety deposit box I opened that week under my sister's name. The fourth I mailed to myself, unopened, postmarked as proof of timing. Have you ever had to gather evidence against your own family, not out of hatred, but out of necessity? Have you ever chosen silence, not because you're weak, but because you're building something behind the scenes, something no one can erase? If you've been there, tell me in the comments. There's more power in your silence than people realize, and maybe your story will help someone else realize. They're not paranoid. They're just finally paying attention. The hardest part wasn't the logistics. It was seeing the photo on my son's refrigerator the day I slipped in to leave a forgotten package. It was of them, my son and Mia, smiling with a chalkboard that read, "Our new beginning, my house, my porch." My son's arm around the woman who was replacing me with grace and paperwork. I left the package on the front step, walked back to my car, and sat inside gripping the wheel. That night, I recorded a short message into my phone. July 17th, 9:42 p.m. They're preparing something. I don't know what the end goal is, but it's no longer just emotional. This is structural, intentional, and I'm not afraid anymore. I'm angry. I kept digging. I visited the courthouse, requested public filings, asked to see any POAs, powers of attorney filed in the last 6 months, with my name on them. There it was again. Power of attorney, Mia Lambert, filed 3 weeks before the baby shower. Basis: elder vulnerability and emotional instability. The supporting documentation: a signed incident report filed with the county clerk, stating that I had exhibited erratic behavior during family gatherings and escalated tensions. I flipped the page. Attached was a short typed note signed by my son. It claimed I had shown signs of paranoia, obsession with control, and unpredictable mood swings. I stopped breathing. It was like reading a character assassination penned by someone who once called me Supermom on Father's Day because I had raised him alone. I walked out of the building into the blistering summer sun, clutching those pages like they were fire. And for the first time since this all began, I felt something shift inside me. A steel spine, a voice that whispered, "You are not losing it. You are being hunted slowly, quietly, and with ink." And the most dangerous hunter is the one who smiles while they sign your name off a life they built with your help. I stood at the bus stop near the courthouse, waiting with the file in hand. Then I saw Mia's car turn the corner. She didn't see me, or maybe she did. She slowed, looked directly at me through the windshield, then drove off. That night I got an email, short, simple. "You don't need to keep showing up, Helen. Everything's already in motion." She was right. It was. But not the motion she thought. Because what she didn't know was that I wasn't watching anymore. I was recording. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. But the truth is, by the time she stood at the baby shower holding that ridiculous diaper cake, I was already too far in. Too many plans made. Too many papers signed. Too many moments where I'd stared at myself in the mirror and whispered, "Don't blink. You're doing this for survival." And survival in my world has never looked soft. I grew up in a duplex off Route 92. 2 bedrooms, 5 people. My mum worked nights at a diner, and my grandmother raised me until she stopped recognizing who I was. My father wasn't around. I used to say he died, but the truth is uglier. He left when I was 6 and told my mum she's too much. I learned early what it meant to be too much, too emotional, too hungry, too ambitious, too loud. So I quieted myself. I studied hard. I won scholarships. I paid my own way through a university no one in my family had heard of. I took internships where I was invisible, then jobs where I stayed until 11 p.m. just to prove I was worth something. I built everything myself. And then I met Ryan. He was golden, soft-spoken, respectful kind, in a way I didn't know men could be. But more than that, he came from something I never had: structure. A mother who sent cards with glitter on them, a living room with real family portraits, a home that smelled like rosemary and books and Thanksgiving even in the spring. At first I loved her, Helen. She had this ease, this self-assurance, like she'd never once questioned whether she belonged in a room. She wore pearl pins and drank chamomile tea and folded napkins like linen sculptures. She never raised her voice. She never had to. She knew the world bent to women like her. At least that's how it felt. And at first I tried to fit in. I helped in the kitchen. I laughed at her stories about Ryan's childhood. I listened to her advice even when it stung. But after the wedding, something changed. She started dropping by without asking. She'd rearrange things in our house, just little tweaks, she called them. She'd comment on my clothing, my cooking, my career plans, always with a smile, always framed as just a thought. At first, Ryan brushed it off. "She means well," he'd say. But when I got pregnant, everything sharpened. She showed up with paint samples for the nursery before we even told her the gender. She ordered a bassinet without asking. She told my OB-GYN, my doctor, that she should be listed on the emergency contact list, just in case I panicked. I laughed it off then, but deep down I was fuming, because I've spent my life having things taken from me: my peace, my voice, my place. And I swore when I started my family that I would never let anyone else write the rules, especially not someone who thought I should be grateful to be included. So yes, I took steps. I changed the locks. I redirected the pharmacy orders. I filed the quitclaim. I spoke to lawyers. Because I knew in the back of my mind that one day she'd challenge me. And when that happened, I wouldn't scream or plead or beg for understanding. I'd be ready. She may have raised Ryan, but I was raising a legacy. And no one, no matter how many pies they baked, was going to dictate how my child came into this world. Do you think pain justifies control? Do you think someone's past gives them permission to build fences around a future that isn't entirely theirs? If you've lived through something like this, if you've been the daughter-in-law caught between history and survival, tell your side in the comments. No one else will. And you deserve to be heard. There's a phrase my therapist once told me: "Unhealed women don't wound, they warn." But I think that's only half true. Sometimes unhealed women do wound, because they've been taught that silence is safety, that smiling through resentment is maturity, that polite resistance is the only acceptable defense. And I was done with all of it. So when Helen showed up at the baby shower uninvited, after all the boundary emails, the forms, the reshuffled locks, I didn't see a woman bringing love. I saw a challenge, a test, a final push. So I made the call, not out of spite, out of necessity, because I knew what she was capable of. I knew how the world would frame her sweet, wise, doting the woman with stories and cinnamon and crochet blankets. But I knew what she was doing under the surface. I knew how she'd been collecting. I knew she had a plan of her own, and I wasn't about to let her win. So I whispered to myself that night as I reread the POA forms and looked at the deed. This isn't cruelty. This is control before I lose it. And then I smiled because I had already made my next move. What she didn't know was that by the time she hired that lawyer, I had already spoken to someone far more powerful. The envelope was pale green, hand-addressed, and arrived on a Thursday morning. At first I thought it was junk, one of those charity mailers that hope to guilt you into donating with pre-printed stickers. But when I turned it over, I saw a name in the return corner I hadn't thought of in years. Claire Brenner, my son's high school friend. She had been in theatre with him, the girl with paint-splattered jeans and frizzy curls who always called me Mrs. L. She went off to study communications, moved to the city, and as far as I knew, disappeared into adulthood like the rest of them. I opened the envelope with cautious curiosity. Inside was a folded sheet of plain notebook paper. No card, no formatting. Just this. Helen, I know this may seem out of nowhere, but I came across something I think you should see. I didn't know where else to send it. Claire. Taped to the paper was a USB drive. For a long time I didn't move. When you've been gaslit for months, made to question your memory, your intentions, even your sanity, something as small as a USB drive can feel like a live wire. I hesitated. Then I walked to the old laptop in my sewing room, powered it up, and inserted the drive. One file, no folder, titled Recording, MP3. I clicked play. The audio was grainy, like it had been recorded from a pocket or behind a closed door. At first I heard muffled background noise, maybe a restaurant or an office break room. Then a familiar voice, Mia. I'm not worried about her. Honestly, once the papers go through, she won't have access to anything. If she pushes back, we already have the guardianship note on file. The lawyer said it's solid enough to hold. Another voice, a male one, laughed softly. You really want to go through with that? I mean, she's harmless, isn't she? Mia again. Harmless people don't show up uninvited and try to assert control. She has this thing where she pretends she's still central to Ryan's life. It's delusional. I'm just giving her a softer exit. There was a long pause. Then she added, besides, if we wait until the baby's born, she'll expect access. Emotional leverage. I'd rather shut the door now. The file ended. I didn't realize I had stopped breathing until the playback bar disappeared and I gasped. I played it again and again. The third time I hit save as and uploaded a backup to my private cloud. Then I sat, eyes stinging not with sadness, but with the clarity that comes when the fog finally lifts. Claire had sent me this. Why? I opened my email and searched her name. Nothing. I checked social media. It turned out she now worked in HR at a mid-sized tech firm, the same firm apparently where Mia's cousin had recently been hired. Perhaps they'd spoken too loudly in the wrong cafeteria. I didn't need the full story. I had proof. I had someone who even unintentionally had given me a crack in the wall they'd been building around me. That afternoon, I printed the transcript of the audio and added it to the binder. I called my lawyer. This changes everything he said. This is premeditation, verbal intent, psychological framing. Combined with your documentation, it builds a strong narrative of coercion and reputation manipulation. I nodded, my voice steady. What's the next step? We build your timeline, and we prepare to go public strategically. But before that, I needed to know something for myself. I needed to look Mia in the eyes again. So I drove to the grocery store near their house, the one I knew she favored. I parked, waited. 45 minutes later, I saw her hand on her belly, pushing a cart full of organic produce. I stepped into the same aisle. She froze. We didn't speak for several seconds, just stared. Then she smiled. Polite, polished, calculated. "I'd appreciate it if you kept your distance, Helen," she said softly. "I have no intention of getting in your way," I said. "Just one question." She raised an eyebrow. "If you had a mother who raised your husband alone, covered his first rent, packed his lunches for 12 years, and gave up her career for his comfort, would you call her delusional?" The smile slipped for a split second, but she recovered. "I think we both know what this is about." "I do," I said, "and so will others." I walked away, not fast, not triumphant, measured, because now I had more than hurt feelings. I had intent, I had evidence, I had momentum. Sometimes justice doesn't begin with the people inside the war. Sometimes it begins with someone on the sidelines, someone who notices something that doesn't sit right and decides to speak. Have you ever been helped by someone you didn't expect? A third person, a neighbor, co-worker, or stranger who noticed the cracks you were too deep inside to see? Tell us in the comments. It might remind others that silence isn't always the end. Sometimes it's just the pause before someone else sees the truth. That night, I pulled the binder out, opened the page with the transcript, and laid it next to the property deed. I wrote a note across the top of a blank page. Phase 2, reclaim. And for the first time in months, I slept through the night. Because now, I wasn't alone. And now, it was my turn. The invitation came in a white envelope trimmed with silver. Lambert Neighborhood Association Annual Community Planning Meeting held at the Town Hall. Open to all homeowners. Public comments welcome. Mia had joined the association last year, just after moving into our neighborhood. She wanted, as she put it, a voice in shaping the environment our child will grow up in. She had made herself visible friendly with the planning board, close with the park renovation team, even suggested the new traffic calming policy. Everyone liked her. I was once the secretary of the same association 10 years ago, back when my son was still in college, and people still asked me how my roses were doing. I had stopped going, until now. I arrived early, sat in the second row. I wore navy simple pearls, hair pulled back. A clipboard in my lap, not for show, but because I had pages to read from. Facts, dates, transcripts, copies of deeds and notarizations. The USB file was in my purse, backed up twice. The meeting began as expected. Budget updates, pothole complaints, a heated but polite debate about a proposed dog park. Then came the open floor section. Before anyone could speak, Mia stood. She smiled at the room, her hand resting gently on her baby bump. "Hi everyone, just a quick update. As some of you know, Ryan and I have been finalizing our family transition. My husband's mother is going through a period of adjustment. We've had some boundary issues, and I just wanted to thank the board for supporting our privacy through this time." She looked directly at me, still smiling. "I'm only mentioning it here because there may be some misunderstandings in the coming weeks. I trust you'll all continue to respect our space as new parents." There it was. The preemptive narrative, the groundwork for silence. I stood. The room shifted quietly but visibly. I cleared my throat. "My name is Helen Lambert. I've been a resident of this neighborhood for 23 years. Some of you may know me. Many of you have in recent months heard a version of events about my role in my family. I'd like to offer a different perspective. Not opinions, just facts." Mia's smile faltered. I opened the binder. On June 14th, without my consent or knowledge, a quitclaim deed was filed transferring partial ownership of my home. The notarization was submitted with a drop-off signature. Not in person, not verified. I have confirmed this with the county clerk's office. I turned a page. On July 2nd, a power of attorney was submitted, naming my daughter-in-law as my representative for health and legal decisions. This, too, was filed without my signature. I have never been diagnosed with any cognitive impairment. I have never authorized anyone to represent me. A ripple moved through the audience. I pulled out the USB and held it up. Attached to this is a recorded conversation between Mia Lambert and a third party captured by a mutual acquaintance in which she states, and I quote, "Once the papers go through, she won't have access to anything. I'm just giving her a softer exit." Gasps. Mia stepped forward. "That's a gross violation of privacy." I raised my voice slightly but calmly. "The recording is legal under our state's one-party consent laws. The person who captured it has submitted a notarized statement. Copies are available upon request." Silence. I looked at the chairwoman. "I'd like to request, as a homeowner, that this board temporarily suspend Mia Lambert's participation in community planning decisions pending a full review of her residency claims and property documentation." More silence. Then a voice from the back, "Mr. Doran, a retired attorney I hadn't spoken to in years." I moved to second the motion. The chairwoman cleared her throat. "This is highly unusual. It's not about community policy," I said, softer now. "It's about truth. And sometimes truth lives in documents and dates, not just smiles and curated stories." Mia was frozen, red in the face, but still. She didn't deny the documents. She didn't challenge the recording. She just stood there, visibly calculating what she had left in her arsenal. The board paused the meeting for a private sidebar. People began murmuring, neighbors, friends, people I hadn't spoken to in months, suddenly looking at me with recognition instead of polite dismissal. Some nodded. One woman mouthed, "I'm so sorry." It wasn't about reclaiming popularity. It was about reclaiming presence, visibility, control, and dignity. Have you ever seen a moment where the mask slips not with drama, but with evidence? Have you ever watched as truth, slowly built in silence, rises to eclipse a polished lie? If you were in that room, which side would you have stood on? Be honest, comment below. These situations are rarely black and white, and your voice matters. The meeting adjourned awkwardly. No conclusion was made, but the message was clear. I stepped outside into the cool evening air. The street was quiet. Just the rustle of trees and the soft click of street lamps buzzing to life. My phone vibrated. A message from my son. "We need to talk." But the shock wasn't that he reached out. The shock was what came next. The courthouse in Santa Clara County didn't look like a battleground. Just pale walls, security lines, and a faint smell of lemon-scented wax on tile. But I had never felt more alert or more exposed in my life. I sat beside my attorney, James Ellison, a calm, calculating man with years of elder law under his belt. Across from us sat Mia, her lawyer, and my son. His face pale, his eyes downcast. This wasn't a criminal case. Yet. But it was legal and public. We had filed a petition to void the fraudulent quitclaim deed, invalidate the unauthorized power of attorney, and request a temporary injunction on any further legal changes made in my name. I had every document, every transcript, every file. But the moment the judge entered and the proceedings began, my hands still trembled. James stood. "Your Honor, we are here today to contest a pattern of unauthorized filings made against my client, Mrs. Helen Lambert, a fully competent homeowner and retired educator residing in Santa Clara County. Over the course of 3 months, critical legal documents were submitted in her name without her signature knowledge or consent." He walked to the display screen and clicked. One by one, the judge saw the dates. Quitclaim deed, June 14th. Power of attorney, July 2nd. Pediatrician removal notice. Health insurance change. Audio transcript from USB. Then the recording was played softly but clearly. "Once the papers go through, she won't have access to anything. I'm just giving her a softer exit." The judge leaned forward. Mia's attorney objected irrelevant, inadmissible, emotionally charged, but it was overruled. California is a one-party consent state. Claire's notarized statement confirmed the recording's authenticity. Then the judge turned to Mia's lawyer. "Do you contest that this recording features your client's voice?" He hesitated. "We do not, Your Honor." The judge nodded. "Then we proceed." James adjusted his tie and took a deep breath. In accordance with the California Elder Abuse and Dependent Adult Civil Protection Act Section 15610, ZO 7, undue influence and coercion, whether physical, emotional, or financial, constitutes elder abuse when directed toward individuals over 65 years of age. My client is 71. Mia flinched, just slightly. James continued. Mrs. Lambert has no cognitive impairments, no medical diagnoses, no legal guardianship, nor has she ever exhibited behavior requiring supervision. The power of attorney filed under her name includes fabricated grounds and relies on falsified behavioral assessments. We are prepared to call the notary public as a witness. He paused, letting the weight settle. Furthermore, we are filing a motion to freeze all current and future transactions initiated by Mrs. Lambert's son or daughter-in-law related to property finances or health directives until this court completes a full investigation. The judge looked at Mia, then at my son. I'd like to hear from Mrs. Lambert's son, she said. Ryan stood slowly. He looked as if someone had scooped the bones out of his body. He cleared his throat. I didn't know what was really happening. Mia said it was just a precaution, that her attorney told her this was normal protective. I didn't read everything. I just signed. The judge narrowed her eyes. Are you saying you had no knowledge of the consequences of these documents? I knew we were shifting things, Ryan admitted, but I didn't think we were stealing. That word echoed in the room. Stealing. Have you ever witnessed a moment where someone tries to backpedal not out of guilt, but because the truth is finally louder than the lie? If you were the judge in that room, would you have accepted his excuse? Would you have believed Mia was protecting or manipulating? Please share your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your judgment. The judge adjusted her glasses. This court finds sufficient cause to grant a temporary injunction. Effective immediately, the quitclaim deed is suspended pending full review. The power of attorney is hereby invalidated. All rights and controls are restored to the petitioner, Mrs. Helen Lambert. She paused, then added, and to be clear, this court considers emotional manipulation and intentional misrepresentation of a senior's autonomy a serious matter. If further evidence of fraudulent intent emerges, criminal proceedings may follow. Silence. Mia didn't look at me. Ryan did. Tears welled in his eyes, but he didn't say anything. And I didn't offer comfort, because this wasn't about broken feelings anymore. It was about truth, about voice, about not being spoken over ever again. Outside the courtroom, a reporter from a local outlet approached. Mrs. Lambert, would you be open to sharing your story? We're doing a segment on elder rights and financial manipulation within families. I hesitated. Then I said yes, not for revenge, not for pity, but because I had spent the past year being spoken for. Now, I would speak. And as I walked to my car binder in hand verdict in heart, I realized something. I wasn't interested in reclaiming power. I just wanted to reclaim peace. But there was still one thread left untied, one final shock Mia hadn't accounted for. And it was about to arrive in the form of someone she forgot. 6 weeks later, I hosted a tea party. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't a counter-baby shower. It was just mine. The invitation list was simple. 3 women from my book club, Rosa, the retired housekeeper, Claire. Yes, I found her through a mutual friend and invited her personally, and 2 neighbours who had come up to me after the HOA meeting with kind, hesitant eyes. I made lemon scones, fresh lavender shortbread, mint tea in my grandmother's porcelain set, and I wore red. Not for symbolism, but because I looked radiant in red and had denied myself that colour for years in the name of subtlety. We sat in the garden behind my house confirmed by the judge, and refiled under my name, only beneath the birch tree I had planted with Ryan when he was 9, and for the first time in what felt like years, I felt rooted, not defiant, not bitter, just calm. A week before I had received a letter in the mail, handwritten, from Ryan. Mum, I know I failed you. I let things happen because I thought avoiding conflict was safer than protecting you. I don't know if we'll ever get back to what we had. But I want you to know that I see it now. I see what she did. I see what I didn't stop. I'm sorry. Ah, I didn't reply right away. I still haven't. Because forgiveness, like respect, doesn't arrive overnight. It's earned slowly through repair. I no longer needed to be part of their lives to feel whole. That was the real twist. After everything they tried to take my voice, my home, my autonomy, I still had something they didn't expect me to keep: my peace. That month, I registered for a community class memoir writing for women over 60. I showed up with a blank notebook, a pen, and 1,000 unwritten stories ready to turn them into something real. I also started volunteering once a week at the public library. Children's Story Hour. I read aloud, did funny voices, wore hats. And every now and then I'd spot a mother in the corner, exhausted, overwhelmed on the edge, and I'd smile at her. No judgment. Just a nod that said, "You're not invisible. I see you." One Saturday, Claire stopped by unexpectedly. "I brought you something," she said. She handed me a frame. Inside, it was the printed transcript of the audio, the one that started it all. At the bottom, she had written, "Sometimes truth needs a witness." I didn't hang it on the wall. I tucked it in the back of my writing drawer, not to hide it, but because I no longer needed to prove anything. I knew. Sometimes healing isn't about being understood by others. It's about choosing to understand yourself fully, unapologetically, and living accordingly. Have you ever witnessed someone rebuild themselves? Not with noise, not with vengeance, but with dignity. Someone who went from dismissed to undeniable. If yes, share their story in the comments. Yours might inspire someone who's on the edge of giving up. Let's make these stories ripple quietly but powerfully. And if you want more stories like this, raw, emotional, and real, don't forget to subscribe. There are still so many voices waiting to be heard. So many stories we've been told not to tell. It's time to tell them.